Thank you, Deirdre, very much. It's a pleasure to have you here. I am a cosmopolitan. By cosmopolitan, I mean not only that I have a stamp-filled passport or that I have lived in different countries and regularly share stories with friends in foreign languages across many time zones. My cosmopolitanism also means more than the fact that I feel at home in a shul, have attended weddings in churches of multiple denominations, and celebrated Ramadan in a mosque in Jerusalem. Yes, one sense of being a cosmopolitan is that we take meaningful interests in the practices and cultures of people who are different from ourselves. As a cosmopolitan, there is a sense of being at home anywhere, which can also mean, of course, that one is at home nowhere. I am also deeply value my tribal connections. This means that I take seriously my particular identity and citizenship and celebrate certain deeply felt attachments. I'm a New Yorker, a Bardian, an Arendtian, an American. To say I'm an American doesn't mean I'm a nationalist in the sense that George Orwell defines nationalism, the habit of identifying oneself with a single nation or other unit, placing it beyond good or evil, and recognizing no other duty than of advancing its interests. Rather, I'm more closely identified with what Orwell calls a patriot. I have a devotion to a particular place and a particular way of life, one which I believe to be one of the best in the world. But I have no wish to force my way of life on other people. Orwell says that the patriot believes their people are the best in the world, which on some days is more than I would say. The word tribe has a bad name. In certain progressive and intellectual circles today, indeed some speakers of this conference were annoyed that my conference description portrayed tribalism in a non-negative light. For these thinkers, tribalism has the aura of prejudice, nationalism, and even racism. There are, of course, plenty of examples of racist tribalism, what Hannah Arendt calls pseudo-mystical tribal nationalism. Tribalism as racism elevates one's own people as superior to others who must be assimilated, expelled, or eliminated in order to solve social and political problems for which they are imagined to be the cause. Such tribalism denies the very possibility of the idea of the common humanity of man. There is, I suggest, however, a positive and redeemable aspect of being part of a tribe that goes beyond the simple fact that we humans all evolved from tribal groups. There is a human need for what Sebastian Junger calls a group-founded solidarity. Members of a tribe, for example, soldiers in a foxhole or coal miners trapped for days in a collapsed mine, share a solidarity born of having suffered together as a distinct group. There is a common bond forged through pain and perseverance. This may be true to a lesser extent for long-suffering Mets fans, but is fundamentally real for Ukrainians, Israelis, and Gazans from harrowing wars, suffering from harrowing wars. Tribalism is born not only from suffering together, I suggest, but also from collective joy. Common rituals, from weddings to funerals, can cement the loyalties of tribal members. So too can memories of a common past and projections of a shared and imagined future destiny. In both collective pain and common joy, individuals forge bonds of tribal identity that can inspire mutual aid and meaningful sacrifice for fellow tribal members who one barely knows, sometimes even for those one does not like. One definition of tribalism is the feeling of solidarity with a group of people that would lead you to die for members of your tribe. People come together in a tribe, learn to depend upon and trust one another, and they build memories of a past and imaginations of a common future. Precisely because solitary life as an individual carries dangers and fears of loneliness and rootlessness that can only be overcome through group solidarity. But the fact that we may prefer today a lonely life of peace and plenty to a life of war and poverty doesn't change the fact that having something to sacrifice and die for often makes our lives more valuable and more satisfying. Tribal solidarity, quite simply, is something we all crave if we are to live rich and purposeful lives. So I'm a cosmopolitan, and I am a tribalist. For most of my life, this tension between my universalist commitments to human dignity and my particularist prejudices for my family, my neighbors, and my various tribes has played itself out as simply background dissonance. It was something I noticed at a moment, perhaps, for example, when I read Ralph Waldo Emerson's provocation to the lovers of humanity who want to help slaves in Barbados. Emerson says, "Rather love your infant here at home." Emerson admonishes the philanthropist thusly, "I tell thee, thou foolish philanthropist, that I grudge the dollar, the dime, the cent I give to such men as do not belong to me, and to whom I do not belong." He would rather give real solace and help to his poor who belong to his tribe, the poor who are here at home, than pursue cosmopolitan philanthropy around the globe. Men do good deeds and give to charities around the world, Emerson said, as penance for their living badly in their world at home. In a world where refugees across the ocean receive more attention than the homeless on our streets, I've always found such challenges to my cosmopolitan sensibilities bracing. But over the last year, I've been forced to struggle more directly with the contradictions and inconsistencies in my own ambivalent position. Like all good cosmopolitans, I've been angered intensely by the profound suffering of the Chinese Uyghurs in Xinjiang province, the people of Sudan and Haiti and Ukraine and many others, and of course, the people in Gaza. As much as I think that a share of the blame for the suffering in Gaza lies on Hamas and its leadership, the cosmopolitan in me thinks that Israel has defended itself, something it has the right to do, with a tribal ferocity that dehumanizes Palestinian lives. And yet, I am a Jew. As a Jew, I understand that a world without a single Jewish state is very likely a catastrophe for all Jewish people. In living memory, we Jews suffered a genocide that sought to wipe us from the face of the earth. Most of the Jews who came to Israel came not as settlers, but as displaced persons and refugees, since no other country in the world would take them. Anti-Semitism is real, it is deadly, and it is very much alive. Since I begin with the belief that a Jewish homeland is a prerequisite for Jewish survival, and since it is clear to me that Hamas, Hezbollah, and Iran will not rest until Israel is destroyed, it is hard for me to deny that Israel has a right to defend itself. So I recognize there are contradictions inherent in my admittedly tribal position. I see these as deeply human contradictions, and I don't run away from them. They're a red line running through the fact that cosmopolitan may be a future ideal, but we humans are tribal creatures. I am a tribal human in spite of my cosmopolitan dreams. Rightly or wrongly, I take some solace amidst my contradictions in the fact that Hannah Arendt also was inconsistent and contradictory in her attempts to balance cosmopolitan dreams and tribal realities when it came to the questions of Israel. Arendt had, to say the least, a complicated relation to Zionism. In 1933, she was arrested while working for the German Zionists to help collect evidence of Nazi anti-Semitism. She saw then Zionism as the only true political Jewish movement, a necessary response to the rise of tribal nationalism in European nation states and the failure of Jewish assimilation into European tribal nation-states. By the 1940s, however, after the war, Arendt had broken with mainstream Zionism. She strongly opposed Theodor Herzl and Vladimir Jabotinsky's aim of creating a Jewish nation-state and mandate Palestine. She saw that the idea of a Jewish state was grounded in a Central European ideology of nationalism and tribal thinking. She believed that any nationalism held together by a common enemy was suspect. And Arendt worried that an exclusively Jewish state amidst an overwhelming Arab population led the Jews to overlook the native population of the land. While Arendt saw fault on both sides, and she criticized Palestinian Arab leaders for insisting on a unitary Arab state, as a Jew, she warned her fellow Jews that Arabs were human beings like themselves, and that it might be dangerous not to expect them to act and react in much the same way as Jews. Arendt hoped to find the beginnings of a new imagination of a post-nation-state world. She proposed a federation of homelands, a Palestinian homeland, a Jewish homeland, a Druze homeland, and others. A federation that might one day spread across the Middle East and even into Europe. By speaking of a Jewish homeland instead of a Jewish state, Arendt aimed to allow both Palestinian Arabs and Jews to do justice to their dreams of national homelands while leaving the administration to a federated state. Sovereignty, she wrote, would be dispersed across national communities, while governance for the territory at large would require mutual action. In such a Jewish homeland, amidst a larger Middle Eastern federation, Arendt hoped that Jews in Palestine could build a Jewish cultural center that would inspire the spiritual development of all Jews in other countries, but would not need ethnic homogeneity and national sovereignty. She was especially happy with the founding of Hebrew University to enrich the study of Jewish thought in collaboration with Palestinians and other peoples. In addition, Arendt embraced a labor Zionism that sought to build a Jewish society on the basis of kibbutzim, to actualize what she called an age-old Jewish dream of a society based on justice, formed in complete equality, and indifferent to all profit motives. She saw the Zionists who formed kibbutzim and sought to govern themselves independently in small communities as a potential vanguard for a new world order that would abandon the nation-state system. When Israel was created by the United Nations in 1948, the ensuing war displaced hundreds of thousands of Arabs who were then not allowed to return to their homes. Arendt retreated then from Jewish politics, feeling defeated. And yet that does not mean that Arendt denied either the right of Israel to exist or its importance for Jews. Covering the trial of Adolf Eichmann in Jerusalem in 1961, Arendt took great pride in the accomplishments of the Jewish state, even as she was intensely critical of the Israeli government. She thought the 1967 war was defensive and reasonable, and wrote to her friend Mary McCarthy, who taught it here at Bard, "Any real catastrophe in Israel would affect me more deeply than anything else." When Egypt and Syria attacked Israel in 1973 on Yom Kippur, Arendt spoke uncritically of Judaism as a national religion and later made a contribution to the United Jewish Appeal. Critical of the fact that Israel was a nation state and scathing in her attacks on specific Israeli leaders, Arendt nevertheless maintained her absolute support for Israel. She declined an invitation to lecture at the anti-Zionist American Council for Judaism by emphasizing her differences with that group's way of thinking. She wrote, "I know that should a catastrophe overtake the Jewish state for whatever reason, even reasons of their own foolishness, this would be the final catastrophe for the whole Jewish people." As strongly as Arendt rejects tribal nationalism, she also rejects the liberal cosmopolitan project, in which we reject tribal realities and political divisions for a universal idea of world citizenship. After 17 years as a stateless person, Arendt received her United States citizenship in 1950. In a letter to her first husband, Gunther Anders, Arendt calls her American passport the most beautiful book. She was a fierce critic of America, even as she was a fierce critic of Israel. But she also thought that the United States was the one country in the world that was free from tribal nationalism, an immigrant country in which all people could remain Jewish Americans, Black Americans, Mexican Americans, all sorts of hyphenated Americans. She refused to love any people, not the Germans, not the Americans, or the Jews. She wrote to Gershom Scholem that while she does not love the Jews and does not believe in the Jews, she does affirm that she belongs to the Jews. It is that belonging to a particularist and tribal group that leads her to affirm in an interview with Günter Gauss, if one is attacked as a Jew, one must defend oneself as a Jew, not as a German, not as a world citizen, not as an upholder of the rights of man or whatever. The first line of Hannah Arendt's essay on her former teacher and lifelong friend Karl Jaspers reads, "Nobody can be a citizen of the world. Nobody can be a citizen of the world as he is a citizen of his own country. A citizen, Arendt writes, is by definition a citizen among citizens of a country amongst countries. We all are members of various nations, so many various political tribes. While philosophers might imagine a world government that is a homeland for all of mankind, politics, Arendt writes, deals with men, nationals of many countries, and heirs to many pasts. To dissolve the many countries, peoples, and states in the world into one world cosmopolitan state would augur not a world of equality, but a centralized world government holding the monopoly of all means of violence, unchecked and uncontrolled by other sovereign powers. Such a cosmopolitan world government, Arendt writes, would be the end of all political life as we know it. It would be the forbidding nightmare of tyranny. At the bleeding heart of tribalism is the conviction that I own allegiance to my tribe beyond the care and concern I might have for others. It is precisely this discriminatory distinction between tribe and outsiders that is and should be unsettling to many cosmopolitans. It is easy for me to summon up anger and even hatred for those tribalists who would celebrate the pain and suffering of outsiders. But here is the problem. Insofar as cosmopolitans see ourselves as superior to those who follow tribal instincts, we too act as a tribe. Modern-day cosmopolitans like to think that we are free from tribalism, but we are actually a modern-day tribe of often racially and religiously and ethnically diverse, yet intellectually and economically homogeneous global citizens. We may not be willing to die for each other, but that does not mean we are not a tribe. It just means we are a weak tribe, one without a strong sense of solidarity and common purpose. The superficiality of cosmopolitanism is likely one reason for the epidemics of loneliness, depression, and anxiety that are overtaking cosmopolitan enclaves around the world. We liberal-minded, college-educated cosmopolitans have faith in reason and technology, but are skeptical of folk wisdom. We are at home in the virtual world of the internet or mindfulness retreats, but lost in the local pub or a NASCAR racetrack. We believe we should listen to qualified experts rather than learn from the experience of everyday people. We are more at home in libraries and laboratories than on the streets and in factories. Above all, we cosmopolitans look down on those we call tribal, those who value loyalty to their family, their friends, their political party, their region, their ethnicity, their religion, or their race over an uncompromising universalism, and those who prefer local wisdom to tested facts. We can be dismissive of the so-called deplorables who embrace nationalist or ethnic prejudices, as well as those whose opinions we see as backwards or retrograde. The danger inherent in cosmopolitanism is this belief that as the tribeless tribe we claim to be open to all when in fact we act as if we are the highest and most exclusive of tribes. We do not see that without the ability to exclude others who are not members of your community, there is no community worth talking about. Arendt rejects cosmopolitanism and world citizenship as dangerous intellectualist and rationalist fantasies. The danger of such a gigantic universal state and world citizenship is that this unity, based on technical means of communication and violence, destroys all national traditions and buries the authentic origins of all human existence. In a single world state with equal citizens, there is a radical loss of depth that comes from plurality and difference. The result is shallowness. A shallowness that would transform man, she writes, as we have known him for 5,000 years, beyond recognition. It would be more than mere superficiality. It would be as though the whole dimension of depth, without which human thought, even on the mere level of technical invention, could not exist and would certainly and simply disappear. Arendt's suspicion of both cosmopolitanism and world government comes from her insight that the establishment of one sovereign world state, far from being the prerequisite for world citizenship, would be the end of all citizenship. So let me conclude with 3 short speculative thoughts on the subtitle for the conference, How We Can Imagine a Pluralist Politics. First, plurality is the foundation for Arendt's mantra that there is no truth in politics. Politics is about opinions. We disagree. She talks about the mantra or the Latin maxim, fiat justitia pereat mundus, right? Let justice be done or let the world perish. Justice be done or let the world perish. And she says that's not true. We'd rather keep the world even if it's unjust. It's an interesting thought. But she says the maxim fiat veritas et pereat mundus, let truth be or let the world perish, that's true, she says. Because without some common truth, without something that we agree on, we can't even live together as human beings. But this truth that she thinks must be is not a matter of politics. It's not something we can politically agree on. It's she says, the ground we walk on and the sky above us. We can't live without this truth, without this home, without being rootedness in the world. We can't live, she says, without being part of a tribe. Second, in a world of plurality, there will be a multitude of overlapping tribes. We need to learn to live amidst strong tribal commitments. This means that we need to hold on to our own traditions and national pasts, and also our own visions of a future. And we need to do so even as we also make space for other peoples, other nations, and other tribes to live amidst their truths and their own traditions. She says that we need a break not with tradition, not with tribes, but with the authority of traditions and tribes. And third, and finally, a pluralist politics must emerge alongside a new common world without truth, without any rational or knowable or political truth. Not through the recognition of rationalist ideas, but, she says, by talking with those who are members of tribes different from our own. The goal is not one cosmopolitan norm of world citizenship, but a federated world of overlapping tribal commitments. One of my favorite of Arendt's insights reads this way: we become more just and more pious by thinking and talking about justice and piety. In speaking with others, even those we fundamentally disagree with, we build a foundation for a shared conversation, a world we share in common. Arendt was unusually optimistic on this front when she wrote, "I personally do not doubt that from the turmoil of being confronted with reality without the help of precedent, that is, of tradition and authority, there will finally arise some new code of conduct, some new ways of being and having authorities." The potential rebirth of a new common ethical world is not only possible, she thought, but likely. It depends only on the courage to speak honestly and openly about absent ideological rigidity. Arendt's biographer, Elizabeth Young Bruhl, wrote of how Arendt spoke of her friends as her tribe. Young Bruhl describes Arendt's tribe as the little island of cosmopolitanism and pariah consciousness. A tribe of people who had lost many of their tribes, or at least understood being parts of many tribes. The word she uses for tribe is Stamm from German, which means literally the trunk of a tree. It is our tribe that places us in a world and gives us a refuge and a home. But like a tree trunk, our tribe can also grow. It can support us as we branch out on adventures and take risks. But it is the world we come home to and stand upon. As a circle of friends, both personal and political, our tribe is much more than an ism. It need not reject plurality. On the contrary, only with a strong tribe are we able to take the risks to build a world of true plurality and true cosmopolitanism, a world that aims not at a world of citizenship, not at a world citizenship, but at the venturing forth into the uncertainty of the many worlds of the many tribes. Thank you very much. We have an extraordinary group of speakers organized over the next 2 days that will be here to guide us in our thinking about this question of tribalism, cosmopolitanism, and how to create a pluralistic world. I want to introduce now our first speaker. In many ways, the person who first got me thinking about tribes and tribe. Sebastian Junger is the #1 New York Times best-selling author of The Perfect Storm, also the author of Fire, A Death in Belmont, War, Tribe, Freedom, and In My Time of Dying. He's a prolific writer and a journalist and war journalist, and has received both the National Magazine Award and a Peabody Award. He's also a documentary filmmaker for his amazing debut film, Restrepo. But he's here because, primarily because he wrote this book, Tribe, a number of years ago, which when I read it, made me think deeply in ways that very few books that I encounter today do, about the same contradictions and difficulties, but also meaningfulness and purposefulness of what it means to belong to a tribe as a human being. I'm thrilled that he's here today, and he'll give a speech, we'll have a conversation, and then after lunch there'll also be a breakout session so you can talk to him more. Please welcome Sebastian Junger.